Everybody.
Brad, I'm so glad to hear Beth's home.
Thanks.
It's a blessing. Maybe Episcopalians are praying for us.
That's
That's
right.
good.
First Assyrians and Americans, now Episcopalians.
You never know.
You never know. All righty.
How's
Leslie.
everybody?
Everybody is good, and we appreciate you coming.
Thank
Tell
you.
us a little bit about, we've got your resume. It's as impressive as we would have thought.
Thank
You
you.
did everything. Tell us what you feel like you bring to the table, what you would like to have us know about your application, and your ideas about the CRA that is still in its infancy.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to be considered for this position and to think about kind of a next iteration of recreation and services for culture and the arts in our county. In the first question, I gave you a lot of information about why I was interested in the board and a lot about my professional background. I can answer questions about that if you wish, but I thought it might be interesting to supplement that with a few personal things. I've lived in the county for over 40 years and have had an abiding interest in recreation all that time. I have experience, of course, in working with both city and county local governments and working with commissions. When I was the downtown development director, I worked extensively with the Downtown Commission, whose powers are amazingly similar to powers that this authority would have. I have had professional recreation experience, of course, for many years, but not recently. So I haven't been involved in all the interesting things that have been happening in the field over the last, 15, almost 20 years. But I have watched it, of course, with great interest. And I am a student of governance. In my consulting practice, I work a lot with nonprofit and governmental boards and organizations. I study governance. I'm interested in it. I work with all different types of organizations in my practice, and a lot of it is related to board governance. On a more personal level, it was interesting to think about this. I thought about, well, what's recreation meant to me personally as a citizen of the county and as a woman. And I realized that I first became exposed to recreation of all different types as a Girl Scout. I was a Girl Scout basically all my growing up time, and learned all different types of arts and culture and recreation topics through the program there, but also leadership. I spent a lot of time in various leadership positions, and today I'm on the board of the Girl Scout Council, which is some 40 counties now. I came to the mountains due to an experience with the Girl Scouts. As a high school kid, I was one of 2 girls from Florida selected to come over to a U.S. Forest Service property near Franklin and fell in love with the mountains, and that's really how I got to Asheville. Went to Western and would have taken a recreation degree had they had it at that time. Interestingly, and all this has come back to me in the last day or two, so it's kind of interesting to think about it. And because they didn't have that degree, I got a social sciences degree, which was political science, social change, sociology, and that has served me extremely well. It gave me a lot of opportunities to move in many different directions in my career and as a volunteer, and so it probably was a good fortune that they didn't have a recreation degree. I've spent days and seems like years with godchildren at various facilities of the county, sitting in basketball gyms with my godsons. out at the soccer fields at Sand Hill with my goddaughter for days on end with soccer tournaments and so forth. So although I don't have any natural children, I have experienced, I think, what families in our county experience because I was deeply committed to these kids having an athletic experience. And quite a few of my godchildren have, and I've been really pleased to have been able to facilitate that. I'll stop there, but that's what sort of came to mind as I thought about, what are my connections at this point in my life and in my career.
I have 3 questions, if that's okay. One, if you close your eyes, you don't have to close your eyes, but envision what the CRA would be in about 5 years, or what you hope it to be.
Wow. I would hope that the CRA would have been very thoughtful in those years running up to the 5 years in getting citizen engagement and in facilitating people all over the county, in the municipalities as well as in the unincorporated areas of the county, having input as to where they would like to see recreation and culture and the arts go. So taking a lot of lead from what citizens are saying. I reviewed your sustainability plan, I reviewed the budget, and I think there's a great opportunity to shape, although it's mentioned in those 2 documents, there's not a lot of specificity. So I think taking the lead from the vision statement that you have in the plan, which does talk about quality of life and place and some things that are important to the field, I think there's an opportunity to get a lot of input. Obviously, there are certain services that are being conducted now with the libraries and things that the board would want to get on top of. At the same time, I think there's opportunity for growth and for diversifying revenue sources and so forth. There's this open question about the municipalities and how they are going to interface with the authority. And when you look at a map, many of the recreation facilities or assets that are within the boundaries of the county are located in municipalities. Whether it's Lake Tomahawk, where my church goes to have our church picnic, or the tourist baseball field. These are places that are important to citizens. And so how does the authority work with that reality? And who knows what will happen politically in those intervening 5 years. But even if it stayed as the HB is now, there would still need to be a lot of conversation, I think, with when you look at these assets and how you do planning. You can't just forget them.
Right.
So I listed in the 3rd question a lot of things that I felt were steps that would need to take place, particularly in the first year or 2. And I think Asheville should, and Buncombe County should be known for our excellent, top-notch, comprehensive facilities and programs. And I see a big vision for the community, but I think citizens ought to have a lot of input as to what that is.
Wow.
I'm sorry.
Minor quick. To me, libraries are under attack all over. And how would you envision maintaining funding sources not being drained away from libraries, and how to increase library participation?
Mm-hmm. Yes, when I reread the authorization, it caught my attention again that board will be dissolved now, and I hadn't thought about the fact that these other boards will go away and everything comes into this. I'm a user of the North Asheville Library. I love it, And frankly, I see it as very busy there, but
Right.
maybe usage is different across the county. I think we would want to keep the legacy of folks who have shepherded the library system here intact. We want to keep those folks engaged. We want to make sure that the support that libraries have around the county continues to stay solid. So I think this is one thing the authority is going to have to work out. How do we not just ignore our history and ignore the contributions of these
Right.
people? I mean, I can think of families for years that have made sure that this stayed in place in our county, and you don't want to ignore that. And I think funding for all of these facilities and programs is a huge question. And one question I have is the 3.5 cents rate that's been set aside, is that equal to what is currently being spent? And I think it is.
It's a little more.
A little more?
Just a little more.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's good. So I don't think I'm totally answering your question, but I think
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's a huge question that does need to be answered, and for all of these things that will be merging together now. You know, I work with clients on nonprofit mergers.
Right.
How do you bring all these entities together? And it has to be a very intentional and thoughtful process. It can't just be happenstance. I think the authority would have to be very thoughtful about how that works. Maybe have special committees or special, subunits or something to keep people engaged.
All right.
Done?
Mhm.
Cool. What deficiencies do you think are out there as far as in the agricultural, recreational facilities that we have now, whether it be, with children's facilities, or what do you think are any deficiencies that concern you?
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure that the facilities that we have are equally, or not equally, but are distributed in sort of a logical way across the geography of the county, be that swimming pools or greenways. And all of these are expensive propositions, so there are reasons for that, I understand. But I think some study and looking at the distribution of facilities and for what age groups and for what types of recreation and cultural opportunities. One thing is I reviewed the sustainability plan and thought about the county's offerings. In the city we were heavily invested in programming. There are a lot of facilities, but the facilities are heavily programmed. So every recreation center would have, probably 18 hours a day of programs at that facility. And I don't see as much of an emphasis on the programming side in the county as might be typical of other counties. And I'm sure there are reasons for that, and I don't know them yet or understand them, but I think there are many opportunities to beef up the programming side of it. I think we've spent a lot of focus on distributing the library services around the county over the last 15 or 20 years, which is great. And so now maybe it's time to look more at the cultural side. I don't think the county's invested quite as much on the cultural side. Lots of opportunities there that could be done, and not just, using existing facilities to beef up the cultural offerings across the county. Those are things that come to mind.
Any more questions? All righty.
Thank you.
Thank Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for applying, thanks for
Thank
putting
you.
yourself forward, we really
Thank
appreciate it.
thank you. Thanks for your service, and look forward to seeing what happens. Appreciate it. David's got
George Briggs in the house.
Hey, how are you? I'm Ellen Fry.
George Briggs, how are you? Nice to meet you.
Go Belcher.
Hey, repeat that to me, Walter.
Hey George, how's it going?
How you doing?
Good, good to see you. Mike, good?
Yes, great. Mike Brown. Hey, Mike, how you doing? George Briggs.
We're going to get you to sit at the end of the table, huh?
And water, okay.
I appreciate it, thank you.
Hydrating. George, we appreciate you coming here. Ask you a little bit, we got your background, your resume, and all the answers to our questions. Tell us what, in your view, what you thought you bring to the table, what you'd like to see happen with your participation in the CRA.
Okay, well, I think everyone may know that I'm director of the North Carolina Arboretum. My background in summary is that I have a degree from Vanderbilt in Business Administration. I have a horticulture degree from Virginia Tech, and I have a master's in landscape architecture professional degree from University of Virginia. My career started at Virginia Tech, went back on faculty there for 6 years, and then I went to the University of Nebraska, where I became the director of the statewide arboretum. And that was a conglomerate of sites all over the state that I think in a large scale, state scale, is somewhat what I perceive that Buncombe County may be trying to do with its assets here in culture and recreation. So I was basically a consultant, designer, and advocate for place-based recreational and cultural entities within communities throughout Nebraska. And that program has grown now to basically impact every community in Nebraska. In North Carolina, what I've tried to do is to take a classical arboretum. I was president of the American Association of Botanic Gardens Arboretum back in the mid-90s.
That is a mouthful. Can you repeat
It's a
what
big
you just
mouthful.
said?
It's called the American Association of Botanical Gardens and Arboretum. And when I was president, I proposed that we name it A, et cetera, but no one. But it is the entities all over the country, like the Arboretum here in Asheville, except many of them are very small, many of them are very large, like Longwood and Missouri Botanic Garden in Chicago and so forth. What I wanted to do here was to create a vision. We started in 1987 as a trailer in the woods, and I took my early staff leadership to Missouri Botanic Garden to look at a university relationship, which they have with George Washington University. Took them to Chicago Botanic Garden, which was a newly developed garden that had been master planned well and developed well, and now is one of the major entities in the country. We went to Longwood to look at the exhibit function and display function, and we went to Callaway to look at the hospitality industry and how tourism would play into this. And so I tried to create a vision early to perceive the Arboretum and our staff as something that was just beginning, but which really could have significant implications. And so now, as I look back, our visitation last year was at 494,000. Our economic impact has been, I think, pretty substantial in the area. We've been instrumental in building not only the gardens you see there for the sort of classical arboretum, but we've also tried to be a leader in development of community relationships. I was involved early on with Pack Place and Pack Plaza when that was all under great duress. You may recall when that opened and no one came. I was asked by Roger McGuire to help with the courtyards, and so I led a 3-year effort to develop those courtyards. They're now back into disarray, really, but there was no capacity really to manage them. But it was important for a variety of reasons they get completed. So I have had a philosophy of trying to give back to the community. I've done that, I think, through the park, Pat Square Park. I've been on that board. I've been what I think of as a catalyst on that board to help really work on the contract integrity and work with the veterans for 2 years and trying to get the memorial in place well. I think we were successful with that. And at the Arboretum, we've also tried to build economic development. The county has been very helpful with the Bent Creek Institute. You may recall, David, that you gave us $150,000 grant in Wanda to help build that thing, and now we have relationships with companies all over the world. We had a delegation from China's largest pharmaceutical and healthcare company here on Friday in their leadership. We're working as a consultant to the Samsung Corporation in Korea, and working with companies all over the globe and all the U.S. And it really started with that support that you gave us to really look at leveraging the Arboretum into something beyond the classical public garden.
So can I interrupt you just a second? How do you consult with the Samsung? How do you tie the Arboretum, and what is their interest in that?
The Arboretum?
Yes.
What we saw back in the late 90s is that we were in an intersection in this region where we had a long history of sort of folk use of natural products. We also had North Carolina, we're part of the university system, so I have sort of access to what's happening in other parts of the economy. But in the university system, what I saw was the emergence of biotechnology advancing dramatically in the state because of NC State and Carolina and so forth. And so what I believe was true is that somewhere up the road there's going to be an intersection between the use of natural products and science validating those and moving them into integrative health and integrative medicine. So we created an initiative around what I call natural biotechnology and integrative health. And we've now built a collection that exceeds federal standards of the botanicals here in the mountains. That we have about 2,000 accessions. And they're arrayed in a way that science and companies can come and be assured they're getting genetic material that's documented from the ground up and is useful for research and product development. And so and we've also created through the nonprofit Bent Creek Institute an entity called the U.S. Botanical Safety Laboratory, because natural products have been unregulated and the adulteration and heavy metals and so forth have been and still are a major problem here and in other countries. And so one of the interests for this company is the fact that we're building a brand around the integrity of natural products and really a transparent supply chain, and building what we think is a future economic sector for the mountains, because it really would benefit growers all the way through manufacturers and producers. So going back to your question, I'm pretty far away from your question, maybe in some ways, but in some ways I'm not. What I would hope to do with this would be to use my normal approach and try to think about, what do we have here? And I'm really not as familiar with all the parks and all the recreation entities, recreation entities and cultural entities. I'm pretty familiar with most of them, but what I'd like to do is to really understand them better and have an inventory of what we really have here as a beginning, and then really begin to think about a vision of what do you want to be in 10 years? What would you like to see this accumulation of assets become, and how would you make them a national model? And I don't know what that means exactly, but that's what I would be hoping to do. So I hope I'll be able to bring my experience and education to the table to help stimulate some of that.
Any questions?
You answered one I already asked, but libraries, how do we protect libraries?
Well, if you think about, an arboretum really is a library of living plants. And the Institute of Museum Services, it's now called the Institute of Museum and Library Services. When I first started my career back at Virginia Tech, I was involved in seeking grants on what was called IMS, Institute of Museum Services, which is one of the federal funding pots for things like Arboretum and botanic gardens. And over time, it became clear that they were really dealing with both living and non-living collections. And so to a great extent, a library is essentially a non-living collection. It has curation, it has
That's a great way
cataloging.
to put it.
What'd you say?
That's a really good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah, so really I think your stewardship of that collection is like the stewardship of your assets and your parks and your cultural institutions. There's a set of best practices, and I'm not a library science person,
Right.
but a lot of those same principles that work in a place like ours at the Arboretum, I think are transferable. So the best practices, I think, are fairly conceptually similar. That's the way I would think of it. I think also, it's like our world in botanicals right now, the world is changing. The idea of a library is morphing into something new almost every month. And so I think there's a dynamic around libraries, just like we have with plants, that they're always on the move. So I think you have to put in place methodologies to deal with that and make the interface with users current with where users are going.
I have a question, and thanks for replying, George. So my question is, and while the answers to some of these questions are certainly not just resting in this new board, I think it rests with the county legislature and other bodies. As you're probably aware, when the idea that the CRA was originally developed, the idea was it would be an interlocal governmental initiative with different recreation and culture facilities combined. So currently, these are just going to be county facilities that are managed by the CRA. But obviously, there's still this question out there about in the future, will it grow? Will it include others? I'm just curious if you have any kind of perspective on that in terms of sort of what you think the real potential of the CRA could be in terms of just managing current county assets and facilities or broader regional opportunities, and just any observations you have on that set of questions that have been surrounding the CRA from the get-go.
Well, it seems to me, number one, just in reading the legislation, that the county commissioners have control of this, which is the way it should be, I think. As part of the university, we're under the control of the Board of Governors of the university system, so I'm pretty familiar with the way that should work. And so what we do at the Arboretum is align our mission and purposes and procedures with the Board of Governors and the university system so that we're relevant in that chain of command. And so my first answer would be, I think it's really important that that however this would function, it functions first and foremost with a clear understanding of that line of authority. I would think that if you're trying to create a vision for your resources here in Buncombe County, you'd want to probably look at the geographical boundaries of the county and determine what in there is an asset that you can leverage. How that plays out into city resources and city assets, I don't know. I mean, that's something I think would be, in my opinion, advisable. But again, it would depend on the county commissioners and the county commissioners' view of that. I think the idea of adding elements to this is appealing to me anyway. You know, I've worked with an entity, I created an entity called CC, the Centers for Environmental and Climatic Interaction. That whole effort began with the idea of an attraction around weather and climate because of the location of the National Climate Data Center here and because of the interest the public has in these subjects and so forth. What it morphed into because of the relevancy that I look for with the agency is the Cooperative Institute for Climate and Satellites. And so now we morphed it from an attraction over to this institute, which now has a budget of around $6 million per year. And the funding opportunity that we developed with NC State and Maryland is about $92 million a year, and it will be renewed probably within the next year for another go like that. So I think, my thinking is you want to create a vision, but you want to have your vision adaptable to circumstances as they change. And so if your goal is to create something of national significance, which I think you have the ability to do here, I mean, you have the same thing that I have at the Arboretum. We developed the World Congress of Botanic Gardens here in 2000. Some of you probably recall. And that was, we had no business doing that. We were too small. We were too young. I spent a year in cold sweat. And then I spent a year in planning. And we pulled off an event now was the first one. And we have 490 gardens worldwide who have now adopted the policy structure we ratified in that meeting. And it's a matter in my mind of creating a vision of where you want to go, and sometimes that vision isn't always seen by everybody. You know, botanicals in the 90s, in the culture I was in, people were saying to me, you know, you really need to be focused on plants. You need to be focused on landscape plants and nurseries and things like that. That's the classical thing that gardens do. Well, in North Carolina, we had a landscape where we had J.C. Ralston in Raleigh who was doing that. We had other places. So I was looking for that place where I could make a contribution, and botanical seemed to be the place that was really untapped. And in hindsight, I think that was probably correct. So I would be looking, Brownie, for the vision first and figuring out what you do with the assets within the area, and then determine whether that fits or doesn't fit with what the vision is that the commissioners hold at that time. That's a general answer, but I'm a landscape architect, I'm process oriented, so I try to avoid developing preconceived notions, but I think the process will lead you to the answer if you follow it well.
Any other questions? Okay.
Well, thank you very much.
We're seeing you.
It's good to see you. Good to meet you. Thank you very much. Pleasure to meet you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Good to meet you.
Thank you.
This is Ms. Johnson.
How are you? Ellen Cross. Hey, Ellen, how are you?
Good to see you.
Mike Fryer. Pleasure.
Hey, Brownie, you nice to see
Hey,
you.
Brownie, good to see you.
And one more.
I'm Jesse.
See right here. On the front here.
Thank you.
Coming. Ms. Johnson, we got your resume, got your good application. We like to hear from you what you feel like you bring to the table, so to speak, and how you would be involved with the CRA and what you believe we need to be doing with this.
Well, I'm pleased at the idea that these particular functions are getting on a firm footing without having to compete with things like fire and police and garbage collection and so on. My particular interest is that I'm a professional librarian, and I think this authority should definitely have someone who's well acquainted with what it takes to run a library. It's exciting to think of perhaps being in on the ground floor of a brand new agency that's going to find its way. One issue that interests me is what will be done in terms of personnel, payment, personnel regulations, benefits, and I'm certainly hoping that those will be maintained at the level that these employees are accustomed to. I was really excited by the idea that the city and county could share these, and I guess that remains to be seen. So I think at the beginning, the way the authority gets organized, lays out its procedures, is going to be very important for what happens down the road.
So are you currently on the board, the board, or were you previously? What are your?
I was on the library board, which I guess is in limbo since the legislation was passed. And I'm also active in Friends of the Library.
How do you envision the CRA in 5 years?
I'm sorry,
What would your vision be for the CRA in 5 years?
5 years. I would hope it would be functioning very smoothly, would have a long-range plan for future facilities involving parks, recreation, and libraries. And it would be nice to think that the city would be involved.
What do you think are some current?
I'm sorry?
What do you think are some deficiencies right now?
Some
in
deficiencies.
cultural, recreational, libraries, parks, some of the things. What do you think are some things that concern you that maybe you would hope to participate in some change or develop a vision for those things?
I think the main thing would be to increase public awareness of what's available. to people in both parks and recreation and in library resources. The library is a tremendous resource for people, and not simply for entertainment, for education, for business knowledge. I'd like to see business people or aspiring business people be made aware of what the library can offer in terms of online resources, because we have just huge resources in it, and we have a staff that are trained to help people with that.
In terms of community awareness and community participation, do you have any specific suggestions that over the next year or two, as this new entity is coming to life? Because we get asked all the time, what is this thing going to be? We have some answers, but it is this brand new thing that's being shaped. So, what would your ideas be for engaging the community around what the potential for this new entity is going to be? And dialogue about the sort of future vision for what it could be. What are your thoughts for how we could do that in a way that meaningfully gets the community involved in shaping this new initiative?
I think we could have advisory groups for various functions or for parts of the city, of the county. I think possibly neighborhood associations, area associations that could be invited to look at what's available to them and how it might be improved. And they could talk with members of their communities to find out what people need, what people feel is lacking, and also to advertise what's available.
I have one other I know we probably don't have much time left.
No,
But just
we're good.
one other quick question. These are obviously currently all the facilities going into the CRA are all county managed or county owned facilities, county funded facilities. Do you think that I think one of the hopes for creating a CRA as opposed to the county just continuing to manage the facilities or the city managing its facilities is that there might be the potential to create kind of more of a public and private kind of involvement in some of this, maybe private, even some private or grant opportunities that might become available for more independent entity as opposed to if it's just kind of a city or county run facility. What are your thoughts on that? I know this is new, so it's probably hard to tell, but do you think that there could be some opportunities, or would that be a little naive and we should, kind of focus on the public resources that are necessary to run these kind of facilities as, really the realistic funding sources for them?
I think to start with, we should probably focus on public functions and gradually introduce the idea of some private partnerships. And of course, the question of funding and the question of access would be important. Involving private organizations might require admission fees unless we could get grants for bringing them in and letting them take part. But I think that's something the CRA could work on, think about over the years.
Okay, great.
Any questions?
How long were you on the board? Library board? How long were you on the board?
I'm sorry?
How long were you on the library board?
Either 2 years or 3 years. Would have been 2 years.
How do you feel they did? Is that an effective board like you served on?
I'm not sure that they knew enough about how a library works to do much more than agree with what was presented and asked of them. And that's not really being critical, because I have great faith in Ed. I think he's a very good library director. But I didn't feel that the board was taking a great deal of initiative.
Where do you see the future of libraries as far as books versus computers?
I think books will always be needed, wanted, and of course there will be electronic books, and as we know now, more titles are being published electronically than in paper, and have been for the last year, I guess. Libraries as an information source will be very electronically based, because that's where the information is being collected and presented.
What made you choose your path in life with libraries?
What made me,
Choose your path in life with libraries? To make this a career?
I'm sorry.
To make this a career, what made you
Oh.
choose?
I always loved libraries. I loved being around books. I worked for 10 years as a reference librarian after getting my degree. And then, lo and behold, we got ready to automate, and I was fascinated. And I volunteered to help, and first thing I knew, I was head of the automation department. This was in Knoxville. It was just a huge learning curve to learn about automation. A fascinating project, and a chance to work with every single person on our library staff, well over 100 people, to help them learn to use the system, to help the public not be frightened by it. There were people who went to the county commission and said, "We can't do away with the card catalog." And it was just a marvelous project, and we could never have gone back once we did it. And being a librarian turns out to be, the fun of being a librarian turns out to be one of the best kept secrets.
You have to be real quiet.
That's why we're actually all a little quiet. Yeah. What book do you have did you bring with you?
The book I have,
Yes.
this is very interesting. It's called Noah's Garden, and it's about people on their property growing the native plants that support native fauna, and about what has happened in suburbia to destroy those plants, and in the course of it doing away with the nourishment of the animals so that they disappear, and the insects. And so this woman, she's a botanist, and she got very interested in this problem. And she and her husband spent 10 or 15 years reestablishing the original life in their yard.
Okay, any more questions?
Thank you for applying.
Thank you. Nice meeting you. Your friend is Terry.
Yeah.
I worked with Terry
Oh, okay.
in Friends the Library.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Mr. Kern?
Hey, how are you? Oh, John.
Yeah, how you doing, Ellen?
Good.
Good to see you again. Yeah, absolutely.
Hey,
David, nice to see you.
Yeah.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good.
Hey, Matt. Hey, good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you.
Joe Belcher.
Very nice to meet you.
All right, sir. Here you are, right here.
Beautiful hot seat.
Do you have some water or something?
I'm okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, this Commissioner Fryer.
Oh, hey.
Yeah.
How are you? Matt Turner.
Nice to meet you, sir.
Nice to meet you.
Well, Matt, we have your good resume and application. Tell us what you feel you bring to the table, what you envision your role in CRA will be.
Well, I think you can read on there, I have a unique skill set that I think will be very helpful to the CRA. Seems to me the CRA is going to be hitting the ground running, and we'll have about a 2-year period to get their act together before municipalities are able to participate. I have dealing with logistics, personnel management, contracts, understanding of contracts, budgeting. Those are all skills that I have and I deal with every day through my small business as a contractor. And I also have an PA, so I've been dealing with budgets ad nauseum for longer than I'd like to admit. But anyway, so I have that, and as well as just a keen knowledge of parks, greenways, not as much with libraries, except that I use them.
Good to hear.
But I've been involved and an advocate for greenways and parks for many years, and I feel like that with the skill set that I have will be very helpful to get the CRA up and running.
Great, thank you. Other questions?
What's your vision of the CRA in 5 years? Like if you could click your heels and
Well, I would see probably most, if not all, municipalities in Buncombe County participating, and I believe that this makes a leaner, meaner machine, so to speak. That's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see the parks do more with what they have, or at least be able to maintain what they have better with their current budgets. And I would love to be able to see alternative ways for funding parks and greenways, because as you all know, it's always a political issue when you're dealing with building a trail versus soliciting jobs or health and human services and things that matter to people. They have to understand the connection between what I feel, the connection between parks and greenways and libraries to people's everyday lives, because I think I put on my application, parks and greenways equate to a good quality of life, which thus equates to a good economy, being able to recruit the right industry, the people who want to live here. I think a case in point of that was New Belgium locating here, but the caveat was they wanted a $3 million greenway put in so their employees could have that quality of life. And I believe that that type of model could work in the future if we are willing, the CRA is willing to do that. We could recruit good industry, good jobs.
What do you see the relationship with the CRA, and what does that board, how it functions with this board?
Well, I think that board is going to take a lot of the load off of your shoulders, so to speak. I think there's a lot of issues that you have to deal with. Parks and recreation is probably not at the top of your list, and I feel like that it's something you care about. I know that, but I don't think that it's something you have the time to put towards it. That I think the CRA will be able to take a lot of that off of your shoulders and be able to say, here's something we have, and present it to you without you having to go get that information yourself.
Do you know, what do you see of some that would be some deficiencies in the county right now in these assets, as you would be familiar with them? Personally, what do you think some deficiencies?
Well, I don't think we have enough greenways, but that's not the number one thing I think is the deficiency. I think the biggest one is funding, being able to take care of what we have, Of course, that's, as you know, that's government. Probably every aspect of government, you don't have enough to cover what you're trying to do. But I do feel like that when you have an opportunity to build another park or purchase the land for a park in the future, it it doesn't make sense to people when they go to their existing park and the swing sets are broken. So I think that that is the number one issue with the system right now. I'm hoping the CRA will be able to come up with some alternative ways, again, of public-private partnerships, sponsorships, things that can help be able to have our cake and eat it too, so to speak. We can purchase the land for future parks as well as be able to maintain what we have.
Matt, I know you've served on the board of the Friends of the Nature Center, and I know that's always been that's a pretty expensive set of operations to run, and but you were explaining to me one time that the board there was looking for ways to bring in more private fundraising, run the system more efficiently, because it's a facility where the city has said, look, realistically the city can't give more than they're giving now to operations, and so that board sounds like it's brought a very kind of entrepreneurial approach to figuring out ways to get the community more involved, get businesses more involved. When you think about a larger set of operations like the CRA will be operating, do you think that there are opportunities to do similar things, with this quasi-independent authority?
I do. Currently, the Nature Center we've been in the process for a couple of years of having a public-private partnership with the city, as you know. Basically, I'm the vice president right now. The president and I have taken under our wing to make this happen by the next budget cycle. We met with Roderick Simmons just recently talking about what they want, what he thinks city council will need. We have the consultant now putting the package together to have that to them by the end of this year so that it can happen beginning of next year. Because we realize the next budget cycle, it's a hot potato. And I think that there'll be those things that are coming down the pike here as well that are hot potatoes that we're going to have to find out some way to fund these things so that people can continue to enjoy what they are used to enjoying. The Nature Center is it's a different animal than I think most things. It's a political animal because you can't really just close it. It's not like the animals are going to just run off. You got to do something with them, which costs money. So the subsidy that the city will give the Nature Center, the idea is to decrease that subsidy over the years. And there'll always be a subsidy, as you know. There's no way we can support that completely. But knowing that it's not going to be increasing every year, and you're going to get it down to a certain manageable level, and then thus we can bring in more funding. And that funding is not only from nonprofits or people that just love animals. This is about creating other ways for revenue sources, putting a zip line in there, putting right now there's really no concession stand, there's no gift shop. There's, these are things that bring in a really large amount of funding. So you have to be able to think that way. What else can you do? It can have
I remember the park out there when they had all the ice, they tried an ice ring, it burnt down.
The ice ring
Burnt down.
Yeah.
But they had golf carts and they had merry-go-rounds and they had the little boats and it stayed open all summer and it was pretty neat. And when they took that out and all they got left was a swimming pool and it hurt you. It hurt that deal totally.
Yeah.
I'll buy it. How did it burn?
It burnt down, I'm telling you, they put an ice skating ring. They used to have electric cars that run around in it.
Oh, okay.
Then they turned it into an ice skating ring and the thing burnt down.
The county right now, as does other municipalities, has contracts with Ashland Humane to operate the animal shelter. And the animal shelter at Ashland Humane has worked with other non-for-profits to streamline costs, and they are able to run that shelter without any county involvement, so to speak. So would you think that would be a good model for things like Nature Center or other entities?
I do, absolutely. I feel like there's enough people in the community, especially in Asheville, Buncombe County, who care about what they care about and are willing to put their money where their mouth is. And I think we're fortunate to live in a community like So absolutely, that's a good model. I think there's some, to be realistic, there may not be ways, for a local park to get the same sort of attention and funding. But there are ways. For instance, when I was in graduate school, I did an internship with the National Parks and Conservation Association out of DC. They had a
When
field
was that?
office.
Say that again. When was that?
That was in 1996. 96, 97. So they had a grassroots field office here in Arden. And we basically went to corporations. We found the needs inside certain parks. We put out RFPs for parks all over the United States. They told us what their needs were. And we already had a funder through the Georgia Pacific Foundation. Georgia Pacific said, we'll give you so much in time because we have building materials. Most parks needed building materials, so that was the caveat. But they had a pilot program, about $200,000, went very successful. Then they gave us $1 million, and we were able to have the Georgia Pacific Foundation name onto that for just a park. And some of these parks were like, you've ever heard of the Buncombe National Park? And most people have no clue what that is. It's an Indian site, ancient burial ground, mounds and things. Nobody but locals really knows what it is. It's near Macon. So because we had that corporate entity involved and the push behind it, they were able then to get other people like, it was a big aerospace engineer at the time, came in with all their people and their generators, and they did the actual work. And so it sort of had a synergistic effect that, a snowball effect, created the synergy where you had people who are willing to do these things. It just needed to be organized.
Right.
And it went beautifully. We did it at the Great Smokies as well, where they would just come in and do the work.
There's a lot of great projects and a lot of money left on the table because people just don't want to go ask the company for it. It's in their budget to do, and they'll do it. And they'll do it around here.
Absolutely. Especially when you can see tangible results.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People hate giving money to a campaign that they never see what happens.
Well, recreational, outlets and things such as nature. By the way, my family absolutely adores the nature.
That's great.
I remember all this over there. I lived on Gasher's Creek Road, which is up behind Rec Park, and I stayed down there quite a bit.
When did that project
Burn down.
Oh, that
Yeah, where were you
early
living?
70s.
Where were you on the ride
I
over?
was at home.
Anybody else with you?
Right.
All right, any other questions for Matt?
I don't think so.
Very good.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Nice to meet you, Matt. Thank you.
All right, sir. Come on, Captain.
Good to see you.
Bye.
Good to see you. Okay.
Hey.
And Mike.
Excuse me.
Have a short nation, Carolyn?
All righty. Thank you for coming to see us and apply for this position. We have your resume and had a chance to look over it. Tell us how you feel like you fit into this. What do you bring to the table, and what do you see your role in the CRA might be if you're appointed?
I think the CRA has been created to steward our very important cultural and recreational resources, and I think those are vital to the educational, recreational, social, physical health and well-being of the community. For over 20 years, both as a business owner and a civic volunteer, I have been involved in many community development initiatives. And I guess I bring to the table through my business a lot of management expertise, real strong sense of fiscal stewardship, which I think is paramount on behalf of the taxpayers for this project. And through my cultural work, civic work, I know how important access is to these entities. I think it will be the responsibility of the CRA board to ensure and enhance those resources for all people. I am a former school teacher early in my life, so the ability for folks to access libraries and all of their resources is critically important to me. I have aging parents in Black Mountain, aging parents-in-law in Black Mountain, and they use the libraries there, and I think that's so important. As a mom, I've been on soccer fields at 7:30 in the morning, and it's been a couple of days ago, actually. And I understand how important the opportunity is for all of our children of all ages to frequent those places and to grow and to be healthy. I am very committed to this, and I think it is a really important opportunity for the county. I am interested and excited about how it might grow and how it might develop over the long run. I have both at work and my civic endeavors a real strong network of contacts, expertise, and associations with the Trust for Public Land, the Partners for Livable Places, the North Carolina Department of Commerce, North Carolina Department of Cultural Resources, the NEA. I've worked closely with lots of these people, and I understand the planning, design, development, funding, all those pieces of these types of initiatives. So I would be honored and very excited and very committed to providing the kind of stewardship and good thinking and leadership needed for this.
All right, thank you. Other questions?
For you, if you click your heels and in 5 years, picture what everything you want the CRA to be.
I would like to see the CRA be in a position to embrace any municipality that chooses or elects or desires to be a part of this. I think it has the potential of being a wonderful organization. One of my clients is Spartanburg County, and we work with the Spartanburg Parks Department. We brand and communicate all of their parks, their planning sessions, their programs. And they have some really exciting and creative financial models that would allow the continued enhancement and development of new recreational resources. And I would love to have the opportunity to share those and put some of that thinking to work in this county so that we can expand that. Not only for me are our children important and our parents and families important, our teams important, but I know from my work with the Trust for Public Land, the kind of economic development possibilities, more and more companies are making decisions about where to locate based on access to cultural and recreational opportunities. And for me, that's another really important reason to work on developing these things. I also have to say, as mom, that I think when you show up with your children, and it's 7:30 in the morning, it's really important that our libraries and our playgrounds and our soccer fields and our pools be safe, be well maintained.
Be able to use the bathroom?
Yeah. So all of those things are really important, and I would like to bring a lot of that expertise to the table.
So talk a little bit about public-private partnerships, companies helping participate, whether it be Spartanburg or as a model and here, to help bring alternative funding to where, people are not going to be, I love the idea of everybody being in it. So if I were a Caesar, and I could do this without raising taxes, then I would want to take a regional model and have all the children be able to benefit from it and bring all these municipalities. And, funding is tricky and difficult. And so how do you engage businesses in helping with some of these important assets?
Well, that's really a strong suit of mine. So the whole fundraising and messaging piece of that, I've had very interesting experience with Spartanburg, who leveraged their funding, what taxpayer funding they had, into some bonding capacity and other things to create some regional parks that literally catalyzed significant economic development and revenue streams that fed back to that initial fund and allowed expansion of even the community parks. They also approached that from the standpoint of creating an enhancement opportunity with corporate or other sponsorships, philanthropic sponsorships, so it could take a park that maybe had a budget of 10 million or 18 million, I'm thinking the original park now. They're actually building a heritage park down there, which is really an interesting thing. But they raised another 5 or 6 million to lay on top of that to create some art amenities and educational opportunities that might not have been, they might not have been able to happen had they just had to depend on a taxpayer budget. So I think public-private partnerships are key to the success of this long term. I've been interviewed by 2 professors in the last year who are writing books about public-private partnerships and the creation of public and urban gardens, about how this community approaches that and what those opportunities are. So that's just another piece of my expertise that I would like to bring to the table and help take what we have and the resources that we have and administer those very soundly, and then identify those partnerships out in the community that could enhance those things for the benefit of everybody.
One of the things, we all are interested in enhancing these entities and doing what we can to make it better for the community. But having said that, you're going to see a lot of people coming with their request for this or that, and their requests are often going to be much larger than what is feasible from what we've heard about, well, we want this to be political, well, it is political. We have to live with the political reality of what, balance is always what we're looking for, what the taxpayer's willing to do, can do, should do, versus how would you deal with those people coming in, how about building us a brand new performing arts center?
Well, first of all, that's an interesting one to pick. That's the kind of thing where I would want to explore what coalitions have been developed and partnerships and funding might exist. I tend to be real creative in thinking about how to fund things, because I understand that taxpayers, I'm one of them, have limited resources. So my first step would be to understand how well done their budget is and how timely it is and realistic, and then to understand who else they've contacted, what opportunities are realistically there. I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think a board like this has a responsibility to help as equitably as possible and for the greatest number of citizens that it can affect. I think it has a responsibility to do what it can, but it can't do everything for everybody. So I think the merits of a project, the homework that's done, the leadership that's in place, I think then the CRA can make an informed decision about the best use of their monies. There's just no way to fund everything all the time. So keeping an ear to the ground and understanding the community's wishes and their priorities, I think, is also critical in that process.
Of course, CRA is responsible for putting together a budget, which will come to this board.
Right.
Approval, so.
And I'm very committed to the financial stewardship of that budget. I mean, I think the taxpayers, this is a step for them.
And they want to make sure that it's run soundly and right. And I would welcome that accountability.
Any other questions?
We use the word stewardship 4 times today, which I appreciate. So,
Well, that's what it is.
I don't have any questions, but I appreciate your interest in serving on the board and for stepping up to do that.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Right here.
Thanks, Ken.
That gets me laughing. I needed to find one.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That's good.
Hey, Ms. Jones? Hey, nice to see you.
Very good. Well, Bill, we have your resume in front of us, and just like to know what you'd like to bring to the table, what would you like to see happen, and your role in the CRA as we get it going and get it started.
Well, I think it's pretty neat. It'd be fun to be involved. I think Brown and I, when we were running in 2007, I talked a lot about looking for overlaps of consolidation opportunities in the county. And then a couple of years later, we started talking more when Esther came on board, and then to see this legislation come down was pretty neat. It's exciting to know that this is the only place in the state that might happen, and
Great.
to see some potential for some, hopefully some good cost savings and sharing. What I bring to the table, I think, is probably pretty good relationships with folks, city, county, the municipalities. I've been on MSD for 6 years now. And worked with lots of folks from all around. And I've worked on a lot of financial aspects of other boards and commissions I've served on. Chaired the finance committee of the city for 3 years, and I think that'd be pretty key. I think the taxpayers want to know where their 3.5 cents are going and make sure it's being handled well. So, and I'm apolitical, so I'm just looking at this from a
good quality to that.
just how can we do things better? It'd be neat to be kind of a role model and for maybe other places around the country too.
Good. Other questions?
Well, I love your response on where you heard from the board of agency news commissioners and your tax bill. So, yeah, we were all in need of some caffeine and some humor. And we get that, so it's great. But what do you think are some of the? I'm a big advocate for children. Some of the things that that you do participate in, and not really loading the question up for you. But what do you think are some of the maybe deficiencies in this in these assets?
Deficiencies?
Yeah, deficiencies. What do you think concerns you? And if you do have a concern, how do you think you might try to change it or affect some change?
Well, I have 5, 7, and 9-year-old now, so obviously children and their use of these facilities would be great. My exposure to government-run facilities and programming has been primarily on the city side. So quite frankly, I'm not very familiar with how the county works their facilities, what type of program. I've seen the benefits of the city and the after-school programs, especially with at-risk youth. So how that could be improved, made more efficient. That would be something worth spending a lot of time working on. The legislation that was enabled doing this is it's not very specific. So I think this board would be neat to kind of see direction from you guys and then from the board where we want to spend our focus and our time. That's one other than that.
How do you see the CRA in 5 years? Like if you could make it whatever you want to be in 5 years?
Definitely not only efficient, but just effective. I think there's lots of questions about, was this a good thing to do to branch this off, or is this just going to be another division of the county? So I think to prove that it would be a good decision for your all's behalf and from our legislatures, that'd be good. Long term, very clearly, I would like to see it expand and be attractive to other municipalities that would want to participate, and see it in a way that could better distribute, how it's being funded is better representative of where the tax dollars are coming from. Could probably answer a lot more.
Well, it goes back in legislation, this is the municipality, city, and all the municipalities are taking out of this for 2 years, and I think I have a little heartburn trying to figure this thing out still yet. But, just with the county dollars, and you basically got the county dollars that were in the budget originally. You got a little bit more, but not a lot, so what do you see that you can possibly do to make sure the libraries and everything stays in the same? Or try to make it better. That's the main thing, a board makes it better and watches the dollars allocated.
Well, I think that citizens might see it a little differently if they're getting information from someone that's not like the county versus city. It's coming from this independent third party.
Coming from the CRA?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when it's city versus county, there's all kinds of history with that out there. So, just a little bit. What was the grunt of that question?
Well, the ground is, 2 years we're not going to see anybody else come in, and you said you'd like to see other ones come in.
Yeah.
And how, as county commissioners, can we, 2 years from now, the city wants to come in, but we got to go up 2 more cents on the tax for the CRA, which brings it to 5.5 cents to bring a city, or I don't know if it's another penny to bring Black Mountain or Woodfin or one of them in. How do we try to make this work where we're not really hitting the whole package of 7 or 8 cents in this whole deal?
I think you're going to have to work really hard for 2 years to really show that this is a system that can work and it can be efficient and accountable and not political.
Right.
To make the sales job to county residents and city residents that pay both taxes on why this is a better way to do this. And I know city residents feel like they're getting taxed twice.
Oh, yeah.
And I quite haven't had a chance to talk to other people, Weaverville and Woodfin, and how those folks would feel, and the size and scope of their entities. But I know the city's huge.
Because we're all district, but that sounds good. You need to talk to the Weaverville, the Black Mountains, the Leicesters, the whole package, including the city, because we're all tied into the same thing.
Yeah, and how you counterbalance any type of shifting of tax dollars from one entity to another. I mean, there's got to be some balance in that. I mean, if it's going to save city payers here, there's got to be some balancing acts. And I mean that's a difficult question as far as how to.
Political. It's not ever going to be apolitical.
Okay, I'll try.
I'm saying it's political, whether you D, R, I, whatever, it's going to be a political, shifting tax dollars is a political thing.
I think it might be easier to sell from an independent authority, like MSD, versus from.
Getting us to do things.
Yeah, so I think that the more, I know Juan is comment about keeping it at arm's length, I think the more independent this authority could be, it's not, initially, it's going to have to be led and kind of directed by you guys, but.
But the commissioners would always set the tax rate.
We will always set the tax rate.
Yeah,
There's no way the legislature will ever let it go.
Gotcha. Sure.
So have you had any experience when you were with the city in finding alternative ways to fund whatever? I mean, there's a lot of different projects that somebody might have on their list in the recreational authority. I mean, if I had an unlimited funds, my taxes wouldn't go up, man, I could have a blast. Because there's just so much things running around in my head, my kids. But
What a surprise.
That's-
there's a little vacant space up there too.
That could almost be the theme of the 4 years I was on council. I mean, we were on the finance committee and as the chair for 4 years with declining tax revenues. I mean, as soon as I got on, it's like everything fell apart. So, not because of me, but I mean, every year we were with the finance committee looking at, how are we going to, what can we do? And we started, when I took over finance, we started meeting in, the fall for our July 1 budget, looking at, and Gary did a great job challenging department heads to look at, alternative A, B, and C. And that's all we did for 4 years. And we didn't raise taxes for 4 years. Hang on that. So that was the theme throughout the city the 4 years I was there.
Is there anything specific that you did that you're really proud of as far as that financial management?
Yeah. Polly used to call it the Bill Russell statement, but when I came on council, there was no fiscal impact statement on every staff report. There was no report, and throughout the years, I think some of the numbers were created, but then there was now a specific paragraph that just talked about the financial impacts, and I continuously pushed on that, not only the direct costs, the indirect costs, the ongoing costs, and I mean, that's something that I pushed on continuously. You know, you can't just say, this is $130,000 a year, if that's actually the interest that we're going to be paying on a 20-year bond that's really $4 million. And so that was something I was always pushing staff. And Roderick Simmons was very familiar with some of my questions because it had to do with that, you know, borrowing money for the some of our new facilities. It's not just a $260,000 a year, this is a $4 million loan we're taking. So
So they're pretty challenging questions, pretty tough questions.
I was pretty nice. I actually, unlike some other colleagues,
The shadow unnamed.
I would talk to, you know, Roderick or Gary, and I would explain, I had these questions, you know, and I'd want to make sure, you know, went on record, but I was never too brash about it.
But they were substantial questions, if that's what
That's
you're
where-
asking.
that's
Yeah,
where-
it's not, it wasn't.
Because I mean, for me, one of the things about the CRA is you got these assets, and we want them to be more efficient, so that if we're able to run them for less, we're able to do something for less, then we're able to have more assets.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely. Well, that's, I mean, I was probably the least known, you know, third place council member, and I appreciate my colleagues, you know, that included, you know, Robbins and Hollies and Brownies and Carlo and Powers, you know. So I think they unanimously said, you know, put me on the finance committee. And that's kind of my specialty, numbers, and that's where I get my jollies.
So one other question, because we're on MSD together, and I think MSD is a great model.
So,
Do you ever see a way that the CRA could develop enough of an entity that we could be like MSD and set our own rates? Do you see a path to that, and how would we get there?
I don't know about the rates. I mean, that's kind of that's a political question that I'm not sure if that's going to be the scope of the board. I would like to see it. I mean, MSD was really efficiently ran. The members, I think, do a great job. They have a great director, and things run really smoothly. Finances are very stable. I mean, I've done that finance committee for 5 years and watched every budget come through. And it's a lot easier to predict and do modeling for that because it's not based on, you know, programs that may be created by you all or other costs that may be out of our control.
I think what I like about that is there's no politics involved, and I guess to me it would be a goal to get this to function the same way.
Well,
And that would have to do with the rates. I mean, being able to find a path to set the rates and leave the politics out of it.
yeah, I don't know how the rate setting, you know, would come in, but yeah, I would love to see it. Like, I think you all, how many members are you wanting to have on from county commission?
0. I mean, if you're trying to get the politics out of it,
We aren't ever
that's
going to
the
get the
answer.
politics out of it.
Well, I'm just saying, that's an idea.
Well, I mean, in my mind, I would think a goal, maybe long-term, would be to get to where you have maybe one member, similar to MSD. You know, Burke, if MSD had 5 county, if it was created by the county, if there were 5 out of 11 members were from the county, if the chair was from the county, and the 6 other municipalities each had 1, you could see the, you know, the weighting on that. So I think the goal to get it, you know, less, you know, maybe have one person on there appointed from the county commission, but kind of be a liaison, and really make it create independent. You know, certainly that's a long-term goal. I'm not sure if it's reachable in 2 years or 3 years. I mean, I think the first group, I mean, we're going to kind of be like, all right, what do we do? Sitting at the table. So we need direction. We need a great director. Been involved with lots of recruiting and hiring, you know, directors, doing their reviews. So that'll be something for us.
We got a blank canvas, so
Are there thoughts on, I mean, has there been applications? Is it being advertised at this point yet? Or?
A director?
No.
No,
The director for the budget,
Yeah,
that's right.
no.
No, it's just-
no, there's been discussion.
Gotcha.
All we did was open it up for all members of the board, and now the board's changing because we need to pay for it. done, so that we could do this.
Well, that's, I guess, the first ask is to hire.
Well, I mean, I've learned more in the last 5 minutes about all of us. Because last night I was, totally didn't know where I wanted to go with this total package.
Mhm.
So, everybody's given me a better idea, what we need to do.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I mean, that's gonna be an extremely important part of what this board does.
Mhm.
It's kind
Absolutely.
of creating the management leadership, so.
Right.
In addition to that kind of vision, broad vision, but I mean, just the personnel pieces of it are probably gonna have, I mean, a very lasting influence on how successful it is, how it operates.
Absolutely.
And if it's just successful or not.
Yeah.
It's very important.
All right, any other questions?
That sounds good.
It's like the corner officers. Just like City Hall.
I'd like to get to use it.
Meeting, we'll take care of it.
So that was the day.
Call me when you find it.
It's better. Out of the lake now.
All these going.
I'm good.